Hi, this is an overview of the movie box office case, and in this overview, I'm going to give you a step-by-step demonstration of how you can complete this case. So the first thing you should do whenever you work with a case, of course, is read over the memo completely. And this memo sets us up to say that we are a movie studio analyst, and we have been asked to find the best movie studio to purchase. So since we work as a financial analyst for a major movie studio, we have to do some research on the other movie studios in the industry, and specifically, they want to know a couple things. On the year-based data tab, which is this data tab here, they want us to summarize the data and answer all of these questions for each of the movies. Then on the top box office, world box office page, worksheet, they want us to create a total row of the for the data, top box office films, sort, and use pivot tables and reflect inflation. Okay. Then the studios tab, we are to make a summary of the studio's market shares um, and create various charts. And then on the discount cash flow, we're to do a discount cash flow analysis to see, put a valuation on each of these movie studios, and finally create an executive summary to summarize all the data that we put together. So you might want to read this last tab, How Movies Make Money, first to get just a brief introduction to how movie studios make money. Then we'll move over here to here's the year-based data. And then let me enlarge this. So it seems like I'm going to make these titles a bit bigger. Okay, so it seems like this is the information we need to get by year. So this is a per year all the way up to 2019 for each of these categories. And I see that there's a couple comments. These are some basic time value of money inflation calculations here. So we're going to work with the cost database. This has the movies, each individual movie, and we have from 2,487 movies. The total domestic box office, which is United States domestic, and then we have the worldwide box office, production costs, the cost of the film, and the release date. So the first problem I see here is they want us to summarize the data by year. And what we have here is month, day, and year. Now, I'm going to break this up because I can't really do a pivot table on that data. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my data, and I'm going to go text to columns. Let's see here. I'm going to put in the slash in there to break up the columns. And now I have the, the data broken up to three. So this is the only column I really need is the year. So I'm going to copy that from over here. I'll copy, put that there. So I don't need to, I'm going to delete these. So now I have the year. So now it's easy for me just to create a pivot table. And if I go to insert pivot table, and I'm going to rename this cost data pivot table. And now I have the pivot table fields here. So I could choose release date, which is the year, put that into the rows column. So I have all my years here. And I want to resequence that by descending. And then I could add to it domestic box office. But I want to put that over here. And then worldwide box office and the production cost. So here is an easy way for me to, I'm going to reformat this as a currency. So now that's one way to get this information for um, the domestic, worldwide, and production costs. And that's what we're sort of looking to put in here. Alternatively, I could also do a um, I could do a sum if also if I wanted to do a sum if for and on the sum if I could say if the year is sum for all movies for 2019, so I could do something like formulas sum if. So for the sum if, the range, I'd go back to the cost database. I'd select E, my column E, 2019, and then sum range, excuse me, I'd like to do domestic box office. Done. Okay, so you can see this 1.4 million is equal to the pivot table here, 1.4 million. So that's alternatively another way of doing that. Now, what might have been smarter on the criteria here, I could go, instead of saying 2019 here, I could just click this cell. And now when I say done, I can actually just click this down and the formula, how's that working? I had to close the formula box over there, but I should be able just to click this down to get the results for every year here in the category. So what's nice about the sum if formula, just resizing the cells here, is that I can quickly get the information that I also put together in the, I'm going to call this the cost database pivot table. And you see this information here. Um, so it depends on which way you want to go, because you could easily create the pivot table. So here's worldwide gross, and on the pivot table, I think we're going to, what year are we going to here? 1980. So if I did the pivot table first, I could just grab the data from the pivot table to all the way to 1980, control copy, and then let's see if I just paste it. Yep, and I can just paste it in here. So that's another way of going if I wanted to do that. So you just have to figure out which way is easier for you. Which way would you rather do, the sum if or the pivot table? Both are acceptable. So since I'm just gonna, but I just want to show you that with Excel, you have options to do it in a couple different ways. All right. So here we have these three columns answered: total domestic, total worldwide, which includes domestic and worldwide together, and total production costs. So now we have to calculate, let's calculate the gross margin first. So the gross margin is always, and we're going to do this on worldwide box office, is always going to be sales minus costs divided by sales. But we have to put the parentheses in from sales minus costs. Okay, so 69.4% would be the gross profit for these films as far as the worldwide domestic gross. All right, so I'm going to just hit this to copy that down. Now, so actually, what are some of these profit? Worldwide gross box office per year. Oh, these are the averages. Okay. So let's just continue with this section here before we do the averages. Now, year over year change is going to be new. Actually, let's start with the parentheses. It's going to be parentheses, new year minus the older year divided by the older year. And this gives us a year over year change. Now in 2019, it's not complete yet, so um, that's why it's so negative because we're not. This does not include all of 2019 in the movies. Now, once you've calculated year over year box office change here, it's going to be the same formula for each of these columns. So I'm just going to copy and paste them into each of these three columns. And we can see that from 2017 to 2018, domestic box office fell, worldwide box office fell, and total profit margins fell from 7 to 6 billion. Okay, so we have those first set of columns set up, and now we're going to do the averages. Average worldwide gross box office per year, average per film, and average profit margin per year. So here again, you could do a sum if, but you could also do a pivot table. So we have the pivot table set up here already. And what I did was I did the sums of each of the years. I could go in and I could change this from sum to average. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually, rather than, I don't want to overwrite this as the example, but actually I could, I guess. Let's see. So I'm going to change this to average. So by hitting this little information mark, I could change sum to average. This is probably the fastest way. And then, so we have, let's just see what this says here. Average worldwide, average production. So we need the worldwide and production of the two we're looking for. So this is worldwide and production. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and just copy this down to 1980. So I'm going to copy this right in here. So now I have the SO, the profit margin here is going to be once again revenue minus cost divided by revenue or box office. And we want to make sure that this is in a percent format. Okay, so we can just copy this down. All right, so that leaves us with inflation adjusted worldwide box office by worldwide, production costs, and profit margins. So we want average. Okay, so we're going to be working, since we want average, we're working off these columns, average worldwide, average production, and then average profit margin. Okay, so what this basically means is that we have to, we need to figure out how inflation is going to affect. So because money, the value of money changes per year, we want to make everything equal in terms of inflation effect. So we could use a future value. Now, for 2019, there is no inflationary change. So that's simply going to be this information here. And to calculate the profit margin, it's the same formula that we have here. So let me just copy the formula because I don't have to adjust. There's no adjusting really for inflation. You're just calculating using that same formula off the new inflation numbers. Okay, so now 20, this would be 2018 would be the first year here. So we're going to insert, I'll insert a future value. Let's see. I'm just going to think about how I want to, there's a couple of different ways of actually doing this. So I think I'm going to use the future value formula here. So let's insert. So the rate I'm going to use is 3%. NPER is going to be, I'm going to take A2, which is 2019, and minus it from A3, which is 2018. And then the present value is going to be I3. And we're going to leave the type 0. So what I'm doing here, the rate of 3% is the inflation rate that is specified in the instructions. The NPER is, I'm taking column A, this is essentially 2019 minus 2018 to get the NPER number of years I'm going to be looking for the inflation. Now, I'm locking down A2 2019 because I want that cell to be anchored as I'm going to drift this forward lower as I move through each of the years. So let me say done here, and close this. And now I could, and what I was talking about before, this is A1 or A2 minus A3. And now I can just copy this lower to get the inflation adjusted rate for all the years. And I can do something similar. In fact, I could just, I could copy this over and change the date. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to reopen up the future value function. And for the rate is 3%. NPER, again, I'm going to use A2 minus A3. But A2, I'm going to lock down with dollar signs. We're going to lock down the 2019. And then the present value, I have to hit negative before I click on the present value of the costs of the film, because present values always need to be negative. Okay, so now I have the inflation adjusted cost of the film, and this is just a formula. I don't have to use any special time value money functions. So now I have, and you should notice that the profit margin is going to be the same because profit margin doesn't change right, when you just adjust for inflation because you're adjusting both these numbers at the same rate. So over here in the memo, they wanted us to find all of this information here in the memo. Well, these are all the columns corresponding to these columns up here. So the last column is the title of the movie to earn the most money, to earn the most worldwide box office. So in 2019, as of the making of this data, it's Captain Marvel. So I'll leave it up to you, to figure out an easy formula to work through the cost database. If you want to figure out a formula on your own to find the maximum, the movie with the highest box office per year, and then copy that title over. So I'll leave that as a little puzzle, a fun little puzzle for you guys to do. I don't want to do everything in this spreadsheet for you. So I'll leave that one little piece for you to kind of struggle with a little bit. So here, so far in the memo, we've completed the first section for the year-based database. The second section, top worldwide box office, create a total row at the top of the data. What are the top 10 box office films, domestic and worldwide, top 10 in total profits and gross profit margin percentage. Sort by studio level 1 and sales level 2. Then use pivot table function to sum box office, production cost, gross profit, calculate the profit margin by studio. And then we want to adjust for inflation. Here's the rate of 3%. So that rate of 3%, I should also put that up here. So that way it's a little bit less confusing. Okay, let's make things a little bit more clear. So then we're going to adjust for inflation and do it again. Okay, so let's look at this. Here is the box office, worldwide box office information. Let's make this a little bigger. All right. So we have the title of the movies, and then we have this ITM means in the millions. So these are in the millions. The only number here, and if we, let me just shrink these rows a bit so we can, okay. Okay, so here this says this number should be divided by a million to keep the in the million format. Okay, so I'm going to insert a column here, and I'm going to call it production costs in the million. Okay. And then I'm just going to take this and divide it by 1 million. Oh, one too many zeros. No, that was right. 35. Okay, so now I have production costs in the million. And sometimes you'll find that with data that some of it might be truncated in the thousands or in the millions, and you have to make sure everything is in like terms. Now, going back to, okay, so they want us to make a total at the top, and also do a pivot table for a box office. All right. So let me create a pivot table first. And I was just noticing here that it's asking for in the memo they want us to do this pivot table by studio and gross profit. So gross profit, I don't see that. So I'm going to go back to here. I don't see gross profit here. So I'm going to add another column, call that gross profit. And the gross profit's going to be, well, it could be a couple gross profits because we have worldwide, domestic, worldwide box office, domestic box office, and overseas box office. So they're asking for here for each studio box office sales, calculate by studio. Okay, so we're going to say worldwide box office sales. Make this more clear. Okay, because we have different box offices that we have worldwide, domestic, and overseas. So of course, overseas and domestic together, worldwide. So what we, so I'm going to say worldwide box office gross profit. So we'll keep everything in the worldwide format. Since production costs are for the film, and that doesn't matter what the box office is, cost is cost. So the worldwide gross profit is going to be worldwide box office, parentheses, worldwide box office minus production costs divided by worldwide box office. And we want this to be in a percentile. Okay. And this is, you know, I think important, but it could also be, depending on how you want to work this, you could also create domestic and overseas box office um, profits, but it doesn't make sense unless I really think the worldwide makes most sense. So let me just put that down. So now I'm going to go back to the memo. Let me do the sort first, studio and then sales. So let's do that sort first. So highlight all the data, data sort level 1. Here is going to be studio. I'm going to add a level, hitting this plus. What was the second criteria? Studio, and then box office maybe? I'm going to have to go back. I forgot. Sales, right. So adjusted sales, though, I'm going to say worldwide box office sales. Okay. Okay, so now it's sorted by studio and then the worldwide box office sales. But I have this. This is ascend. This is, I don't, this, I want to make, I'm going to redo this because I want to show you something here. In the sort, it said A to Z, which is what I want for the studio. But for the box office, I think I want largest to smallest. So I could see the largest films first and then the descending. I think that makes more sense to what I would like to see as organizing the data. So, so I could put that in here, largest to smallest. And you see, you should, whenever you write something in Excel, it's just like Word. You can review and do a spell check because I know there's a spelling error right there. So you could do a spelling check. Okay, just clean that up. All right, so now we have our sort done, and we can progress to the next part of this memo here, which is I'm going to do the totals at the top last. So I've done in the top 10, the bottom 10 profit margins lay at last. So I first now want to do the pivot tables. So adjust the box office for inflation. Okay, maybe I should, before I do the pivot table, I'm going to put the inflation results in for the box office for sales and profits on the box office. So I might as well have it in the data before I set the pivot table, so that way, um, I'll be able to manipulate that in the pivot table also. So let's go here. Okay, so I'm just going to open up a column here, insert, and I'll say, I'm going to copy this title over, put this in here, and we'll say inflation and just adjusted. And again, I'll use that same setup where I'll say future value. The rate is the 3% from the memo. And then the N per, I'm going to say 2019 minus the current year. And then the present value is going to be the box office. And remember, before you do a present value, you got to make it negative. You put a negative sign in front of it. If you don't put a negative sign in front of it, you get this result here that's going to be a negative result. So we just put a negative in front of it, so we wind up getting positive result. Okay, so now that I have this basic formula set up, I can have my inflation adjusted box office. So if the year is 2012, you can see that there's the adjusted inflation will go up because now this isn't 2019 dollars, this isn't 2012 dollars, and 2019 dollars are inflated. So I would have to do something similar for the production costs as well. Adjusted production costs. And now I could put in here similar formula. Rate is 3%. N per be 2019 minus the current year. Where's the year? Must be going here. It is the year. And then the present value would be the production costs. And again, I put a negative amount in, so it comes up positive. So you see here that it's the same because that movie was in 2019. So it's only the years where the base year differs from the current year that we're going to get inflation adjusted production. So now I could also do inflation adjusted worldwide gross. And this would really just be I'm going to take the inflation adjusted worldwide sales minus let's do it again. Inflation adjusted worldwide sales minus the production costs, the inflation adjusted production costs. And actually, I should make it a percent divided by C2, which is the worldwide sales. And we should get identical percents. Sort of double check. I was going to go for dollars, but we'll just do percent. So we have here, these are the profit margins. Okay, did they want profit dollars? No, I think they just wanted, I think they did want gross profits as well. So we could add in gross profits here. This is gross profit percent, is what's calculated here. So let's just, for the hell of it, we'll add in a column, gross profit. Without the percent, and that would simply be worldwide sales, non-adjusted minus non-adjusted production costs. And actually, if you calculate this first, it's easy just to go gross profits divided by production cost. You get the same percentage because, oops, it's just basically these formulas. I'm doing half the formula in this column already. So let's go over here and insert. I guess you can never have too much data, right? So let's do the same. So we'll need the box office adjusted for inflation minus the production costs adjusted for inflation. And I'll use the paint to just quickly update the format. Okay, so here we see okay. All right, so now we have all the data we could possibly want, and I'm going to create the pivot table. Use my quick keys to highlight the whole area. I don't actually need that column. And I'm going to go insert pivot table. And now I have my pivot table. I'm going to relabel it pivot table top worldwide box office. And then I'm going to actually create, I'm going to go ahead and create another pivot table based on that. And this one, we'll call this one pivot table adjusted inflation total worldwide box office. And I'll get to the reason why in a minute. I'll get back to that. So let's go to the first pivot table here. And in the memo, it was saying to do total box office sales, production costs, and gross profits by studio. So studio is going to be my deciding factor. So here I have studio, and then worldwide box office, sales, and then we'll do production costs and gross profits. So I'm going to wrap the text here so that way I could make these columns smaller. All right, there we go. That's what I want to do. These are a lot of words in here, so I want to make these columns smaller. Okay, so now we have, and let's, it doesn't automatically bring the format over, so I'm going to bring the changes to currency. All right. Okay, so now we have our information here, and this is by just without inflation. So here, if we do after inflation, I can do the same thing as studio, but now I could do the adjusted for inflation numbers. Let's just adjust these. Okay. Should make this bigger so you can actually see it. And again, let's put this in currency. All right. So now we have, this is our sales, costs, profits without inflation adjustment, and then we have our sales, cost, profits with inflation adjustment. Okay, so let's go back to the memo. All right, so I still haven't created the totals at the top of the data, but I have done the sort, the pivot table for the world box office, sales, costs, and profits, and the inflation adjusted box office pivot table at a 3% rate, and then the new, using the new inflation adjusted sort by level 1 studio sales. Okay. And then the pivot table is sum by studio, okay, which I did. Okay, so we could see basically what this last question is asking, since you have the inflation adjusted, which is the total. So if I sort this by total world box office, okay, with the pivot table, it's not easy to sort, but we could see here just from the numbers that looks like a BV, which is a subset of Disney, has the highest after inflation at 97 compared to this would be the next Warner Brothers 94 and profits at 74. And before inflation, they would also be number one as well, which makes sense because it's proportional. So there's no should be no change there in total. Well, it's actually there could be a change, but it just happens to be the same results. Okay. Now in the database, they wanted let's see right here. They wanted us. This is how you could create when it's asking for what are the top 10 domestic and worldwide films and the top 10 films in profit and gross domestic dollars. You could do a set of sorting here. So you could sort by the um, first you could sort by world domestic, then worldwide, and then total profits to get these top 10. You could also, I believe you can put in a filter, and then if you have the filter set up, you could say top 10. So here I could create a filter and I could easily get the top 10 world box office. Um, and then you could just kind of highlight that, copy. There's a way to paste special where you don't get all the lines in between. Oh, actually just you can do it like that. Okay. So if I was going to create a new tab, and I can call this top, a top 10 tab, I could just go into my world-based data with these filters, and for each of that's worldwide. Now for domestic, I could just click on this, and I could say top 10. Create the first. Let me release this filter, clear the filter, close that, and I have the filter set for box office domestic. And if I want to change this is the top 10, I can also put this to the bottom 10. And you can see how it's going to easily switch the movies around. And you can just, cut and paste. You can copy and then paste over here. And if you didn't want these two columns, which you don't need for this, I can just put this over here. And then I could delete these. So that's an easy way to create the top 10 and bottom 10 by using these filters. Let me clear the filter. Close this. Okay. So that would probably be the easiest way if we go back to this memo to create the top 10, the top 10 box office, domestic and worldwide, top 10 films in total profits, gross and total profit gross margin. But down here, you're going to do the same thing again, but now for studios for inflation adjusted. So basically what we have in the top 10, this first top 10 was worldwide box office. So now we'd go back and we'd say, well, we have the filters already on there. So let's filter that now by worldwide box office for adjusted, inflation adjusted. So I just go here, again, top 10. I can copy this to my top 10. I don't need the worldwide. I just want delete that. So now we see that the inflation adjusted, it's a different mix because here with the inflation adjusted, you can see that we have ET is in the top 10. Star Wars is in the top 10. So inflation adjusted films are quite different than non-inflation adjusted. Sorry, I should make this bigger so you can see that. So you see the list is quite different when you're doing inflation versus non-inflation worldwide box office. So that's really what this question 6 is kind of saying to do. Okay, so I left question 1 to be the last thing to do. So let's go back here. I'm going to remove the filter, clear the filter here, bring all the data back, and I'm going to insert, and now I can just put in totals, and then I can do on the formulas page, this is the quick auto sum. I can do average, things like that. So I'm just do a quick sum, and let me just highlight the column, and I have my sum. Take out the currency, and then I'll just drag this across. And I'm going to go here. I'm going to copy the format. Let me center this. All right. So some things, domestic, this is a formula. So no, it's not a formula. This is a percentage. So it says percentage, it's basically saying take the box office and divide by the worldwide to get the percentage. I like to have these center totals. I'd also like to put this double bottom here to let them know that it's totals. All right. So this is the same thing where you want to say overseas divided by worldwide to get that percentage. Year, what does it say? We don't need a total of various years. And again, we could use this formula here. And we could see that if I double click the paint, I can do multiple cells with the formatting. You have to double click it fast. All right. Okay. And this just doesn't really matter, so let me just minimize that. All right, so now I have the totals at the top, and I've completed everything in the memo section for the worldwide box office. Now in the studio section, so there's a studio tab here, which is blank. It's saying in the memo, using the data from top worldwide box office, calculate the worldwide box office by studio and total dollar profits by studio. Calculate each studio's gross profit margin, percentage of market share, and percentage of market share. Create some charts. Worldwide sales, okay, by studio. All right, so I have in the pivot table, I'm going to just move this here so the pivot tables are, I have the pivot table of, and now it doesn't ask for inflation adjusted, it's just saying for using the regular data. So I don't have to worry about inflation adjusted right now. It just wants me to put the studio data in the studio tab. So I could take, here's the studio data here. So I could take this, I'm going to copy that and put it into the studio table here. And maybe let me undo that. I'm going to try and paste special. And I just want I don't want the formulas, I just want the values and the values and number formats, because I don't actually want to bring the pivot table over, because having the pivot table can sometimes make things difficult to manipulate. Okay, so typically if the data is less than 20 rows, you can have the totals at the bottom. But if the data is going to be on multiple pages, you should usually have the totals at the top. So that way your boss doesn't have to scroll down to the very bottom to get the total numbers. Okay, so it was asking for in the memo, if you remember, the memo was saying they wanted us to get the studio information, then calculate the percentage of market share. So if we were to do percent of market share, I could just say worldwide divided by the individual. Actually, I did that backwards. I should do the studio divided by the worldwide total, and that gives me my percent on market share. And if I want, I should lock down B2. So this way, nope, I don't want to lock down B2. I want to lock down B16. So this way I could just easily copy it down. And somehow that didn't work. Oh, because I still have that $sign there. All right. And this should be 100%. Okay, so that makes sense. Okay, so we have market share. And then let's see, what else? What we could do now. So in the studio, they wanted us to create the rank by the studio, calculate each studio's percentage of market share, and then create a pie chart. Okay. So I'm going to make a new row for the pie chart. I'm going to make what I'm going to do here is it's going to make the titles a little bit simpler. I'll just say sales, cost, profit, share. Okay. So now when I go to create a pivot table, let's go to insert, not pivot table, I want to create a pie chart. Insert, I'm going to hit this pie chart. And now I can create a pie chart by studio. And this can be, oops, I can click these alternate, let's move this up. I'm going to move this so you can see the whole pie chart. So I have these alternates that I could click that would show different pie charts that you can easily on the fly kind of create. Different looks depending on how you'd want to display it. I'm not sure which is best. All right, so and let me just move this out of the way. Okay, so let's go back to the memo. Check. We did using the data, we calculated by studio from our pivot table, and then we did the gross, oh, we didn't do the gross profit percent. We only did the market share. So I need to do the gross profit percent, gross profit margin, and we did do, oh, actually create 4 charts for worldwide, chart by studio for sales, profits, and market share, and gross profit margin. So you'd have to do those charts again. Let's go back to studio. So let me do, I'm going to insert a column. And we're going to say gross profits. It's the gross margin percent. Abbreviated tile will be just GMP. And this is going to be the profits divided by the sales. Okay. So this is the gross margin for each of the two. So I forgot to edit it in before. Let me center these titles. Let's see, put a grid box around it. And I could do the same here. I can just highlight this, say Format Painter, copy that. This is the second set of titles. Okay, so then you would have to make multiple charts now based on what it says in the memo, which you can go ahead and I'll just leave you to that. So now we're moving into the discounted flat cash flow worksheet. For each film makes additional profits after release based on DVD sales, TV rights, merchandising, I guess. Additional profit is going to be 8% of 2019 inflation adjusted sales. So, for example, if the film made $100, then after release, it would make $8 a year in profits based on 2019 adjusted sales. Using this information to create a discounted cash flow model. Okay, so discounted cash flow. So I want to bring in here the studio and the worldwide box office dollars, but it's saying here make additional 8% of 2019's inflation adjusted sales. Okay, so that means for each of the studios. Okay, so we've already calculated the inflation adjusted sales for 2019. So if we go to the pivot table, inflation adjusted, or I guess I put here after inflation. So we created one pivot table, which was the sales, just plain sales, and then we did one based on the inflation. So let's take, I'm going to highlight, I want these two columns. So I'm going to get the inflation adjusted worldwide box office sales, and we've adjusted these to 2019 dollars already. I'm going to bring this over to discounted cash flow tab, and I'll paste this here. So now I have the box office worldwide, and I'm going to relabel this worldwide box office 2019 dollars. So we know that it's adjusted for 2019 dollars. Okay, so additional profits are going to be 8%. So what it's basically saying is if the box office makes 97 million, this is in the millions. I should put that in the title too. So all our numbers were in the millions. So 97 billion box office, going to earn an additional 8%. That would be $7.7 billion of additional profits every year from the additional money that these movies throw off. Because when a movie is released, say a movie like Star Wars is released in 1977, very popular, every year after that movie was released, it made money because it's been on TV, there's been different merchandising and different international sales and TV rights and now streaming rights. There's a lot of additional income being made. So these are additional profits, 8%. Now, here we're going to discount these cash flows. And we're going to use, it says here to use a rate of 5%. The exponent year is 2019 and cash flow from year C. Okay, so we're going to do the discounted cash flow now. So let me just see. I should probably put in the discount rate is, let's say 5%. Okay. Just in case someone doesn't see this comment here, the discount rate is 5%. Okay, so for 2019, let's create a formula to calculate the 2019 uh, present value. So we're going to use a present value formula. So I'm going to say formulas and insert. I'm going to search for present value. And the rate is going to be 5%. The N per. Oh, before I do this, let me just close this down. Before I do this, I want to put the year above here because it's going to make it easier when I do this formula. So I'm just going to say 2019, 2020. And that Excel is this flash fill where if I kind of copy this across, it'll just automatically date the numbers for me. So I'm just going to, let me center that, and then I'm going to make that smaller. Okay. And this will help me with the formula. So just a little trick. So I can more easily put in the present value formula. Okay, so the rate is 5%. The N per is going to be 2019. Is going to be actually this number up here minus 2019. And you see as we go, as I could drag this formula along, it will pick these numbers up here for each individual cell. And then the future value is going to be the additional profits. And I have to, let's see. Okay. So I'm going to put a negative in front of the future value so that comes out as a positive number. All right. Now, if I want this for each studio, the D1 up here, I need to lock in the one column, the dollar sign, because I don't want the row to drift. I want to lock in the one row, because I don't want the row, but the D can drift. So if I should be able to copy this down. Okay. So that makes sense. It should be since we're using 2019 versus 2019, there should be no difference. The difference should occur. Now, if I copy this over, the differences will occur as we're moving forward in time. So inflation adjusted, the cash flow is going to get larger, smaller, as we move out in the future as we're adjusting for inflation. So, and so you can kind of see here how the cash flow is going to be $2019 is not going to be as valuable in 2028 because of the discount. We're discounting it. That's how the discounting model works, as we discount those cash flows. And then we could do at the very end, we could add up the discounted cash flows by going into formula sum, and it will automatically grab the column. We got to make sure we wanted to start though at D. So let me just adjust this to be D, not B. Okay, so this would be the accumulated cash flows for all the different years. And then you may even want to, right now this is sorted alphabetically. You could later, if you wanted to, you could sort it by discounted cash flow to see which companies had the largest, the discounted company. The company with the largest discounted cash flow would be the most valuable, which would be BV here. Okay. Now, so now we've answered all the questions. Last thing to do here is you would have to make an executive summary, which based on the results that you created, which studio do you think we should buy based on all the information that you gathered? Do a introduction, recommendation, and a financial analysis on this information. and it should be rather detailed because this spreadsheet is rather detailed. And remember, for each of the pages, you will need to be um, considered proper putting together a professional spreadsheet for every page. You should go through um, in the beginning. You want to freeze. I'm going to freeze the top row here. So click on freeze top row, and then I'm going to highlight the area, and I'm going to set my print ranges. I'm going to set the print range. I'm going to check my page setup. Man, this should probably be landscape. I'm going to fit this to one page. Hit OK. And I'm going to double check that all my formats are correct. Like so here, one bad thing here in my formatting is that I shouldn't have change if it's, large numbers shouldn't have change associated with them. And I see here that it kind of looks like things are in um, different fonts even. So I'm going to go make sure everything is level 10, and we'll say we'll keep everything in Arial. Okay. So now things look more uniform. Before they were not uniform. And actually, I notice here that some cells have grid lines, some don't have grid lines. So I'm going to add grid lines to everything. Okay, now it looks a lot better. I could even resize the columns, make it a little bit better utilization of space. So for each, and why do we set the print ranges for each of these uh, pages? Well, the reason is that you want to set these print ranges. So if somebody, and this happened to me once, if your boss prints out your work and you don't have the print ranges set out and you didn't set up the page, it could print out 1,000 sheets. So in that respect, your boss might be pretty ticked that he's wasted all this paper on his printer because you didn't set up the proper um, formatting on the page. All right. So if I go to print, I get a preview, and I can kind of go to the end, and I see that. I mean, this is good enough, but you get the gist that you want to make sure that everything is professionally set up so that if someone does print a section of your worksheet, it doesn't spit out 1,000 pages, and that all the formatting is correct on all the sheets as best as possible. Dollars are expressed as currency, presents are presented as percents. Studios, the columns are maximized, so instead of being lazy and having a title like this taking up all the space, you wrap, like I've shown you, you wrap the titling so you can kind of shrink it and have a better use of space for each column, so you get more value on the screen. Okay, so that's the rather long but complete video on how to complete this double case basically in the movie box office case. And so lastly, what you'd have to do is create the executive summary. Okay, so I hope that helped you to complete this case and understand better how to do this financial model and this financial analysis of the movie industry. Thank you and best of luck.